Welcome to the Pro Tips video series designed to arm biology learners with background knowledge needed to succeed during upcoming lessons. I'm Professor Workman, and today's Pro Tips build on prior knowledge of enzymes, the macronutrient contents of food, and electronegativity. Are you intrigued how these concepts weave together? Keep watching to understand that life is synonymous with a slow burn of energy. Due to the difference in electronegativity between oxygen and hydrogen, the stealing of hydrogen's electron can be violent. Without any controls, this results in an explosion of flame, light, and heat, all manifestations of the energy released when oxygen and hydrogen combust. Consider the Hindenburg, a Zeppelin airship that floated because it was filled with hydrogen gas, which is less dense than the solution of atmospheric air. This is the same reason helium-filled birthday balloons float. In 1937, a miner crash with its docking station in New Jersey created a spark, and the entire thing, containing over 7 million cubic feet of hydrogen, burned out in just 90 seconds. On Wikipedia, you can listen to a radio broadcaster who happened to be there the day it crashed and hear the horror in his voice. The speed with which the Hindenburg burned demonstrates my point that non-living things, which lack controls, combust instantaneously, losing energy to the environment as heat and light. Living things, however, build machines that slow the release of this energy, functionally controlling the burn of hydrogen and oxygen. Next, we'll consider how that is achieved. Here are some molecules found in your food: carbohydrates and saturated fat. Notice the many hydrogens along their sides. All of these hydrogens are available to burn for energy. During digestion, these big molecules are cut into smaller pieces. Notably, this involves cleaving off all of these hydrogens. The more hydrogens on a molecule, the more calories it provides you. These hydrogens float around in the cell soup, and assuming you're breathing, oxygen is also present. Because oxygen is greedy to snatch electrons away from its neighbors, the low electronegativity hydrogens are in grave danger. Recall that oxygen has a high electronegativity relating to the unpaired electrons in its valence shell. Also recall that hydrogen has a low electronegativity because it could achieve a full valence shell by giving up its sole electron. So the electrons on hydrogen get tugged toward any nearby oxygen atom. This could result in disaster if oxygen were allowed to combust with all those hydrogens. This reaction produces water, but also a ton of wasted energy released as heat. This unchecked reaction does not produce energy that can fuel cellular functions. And if this were always the interaction between your food and your breath, then your cells would starve to death. So instead, cells build a protein fortress around oxygen. It's like oxygen is protected from hydrogen invaders inside the walls of a castle surrounded by a moat. It's secure. There is just one way into this castle. It's across a series of stepping stones. Each stepping stone is a cellular machine with a name and a job. Right now, it's not important to know their names, but let's talk about what they do. I'm calling these stepping stones, taken together, the Great Respiratory Complex, a name I just made up right now. Imagine hydrogen's electron as a medieval knight wanting to reunite with a beautiful princess imprisoned inside the castle. He knows she's in there and can feel her attraction, just as this hydrogen's electron feels the tug of oxygen's superior electronegativity. But there is only one path forward. The first stepstone along this hero's journey is an enzyme. Now, if hydrogen were the size of a human, this enzyme would be the size of the Empire State Building. And on the ground floor, it looks and functions differently than on the tippy-top sky deck. On the ground floor of this enzyme, there is a moderately electronegative section that, although not nearly as electronegative as oxygen, it is strong enough to gently detach the electron from a hydrogen atom. This new input causes the enzyme to change shape. The ground floor door of the Empire State Building enzyme closes when, in fact, not one, but 2 electrons have entered the building. Another way to visualize this enzyme is as a catcher's mitt. It is open and ready to catch exactly 2 electrons, but once they're inside, it closes, just like a mitt closes around a caught ball. So 2 hydrogens are recruited at a time. And that's okay because there are plenty of hydrogens in the cell soup. The enzyme strips these electrons right off of their hydrogen atomic nucleus. They are now a team, and they will reach the castle and rescue the princess together. As they climb the stairs of the Empire State Building enzyme, they energize the enzyme to catalyze a reaction. This reaction releases some energy, just enough energy to push 4 naked protons across a membrane. These are hydrogens who have lost their electron. There are many such naked protons in the cell soup. From the top of the building, our electron heroes can jump to the next stepstone. The next stepstone is like a zip line from the top of the Empire State Building to a neighboring skyscraper. The electrons can attach to it because its electronegativity is stronger than the Empire State Building with its door shut, so our heroes bravely take up the grab bar on this zip line, hold tight, and ride this carrier over to the next skyscraper. No work is being performed at this step. The carrier's job is simply to move electrons from point A to point B. Step 3 on our hero's journey is another large enzyme. That's why I called it a skyscraper. Its electronegativity is slightly higher than the zipline carrier, so once they arrive, the electrons hop off of their carrier and land on the sky deck of Stepstone 3. Just as before with the Empire State Building enzyme, this Step 3 enzyme also changes shape when the electrons land on it, like a catcher's mitt with a baseball in it. The electrons energize this cellular machine to catalyze another reaction. Similarly, this reaction releases some energy, just enough, again, to push 4 more naked protons across a membrane. It's a different enzyme, but in this way it results in the same outcome as our Empire State Building enzyme from Step 1. They both push 4 protons in the same direction across the membrane. So those protons are accumulating on the other side. It's getting crowded with protons over there. Step 4 is another carrier. The electrons jumped onto this carrier because, once again, its electronegativity is slightly stronger than the Step 3 enzyme with its doors closed. Notice we've gone enzyme, carrier, enzyme, carrier. Guess where our heroes land next? Another enzyme. Step 5 is when the electrons reach the castle enzyme. Once inside, they find their oxygen princess, bind to her, and eventually escape the castle as a throuple. That's a 3-person couple. The arrival of electrons to the castle enzyme energizes it to catalyze a reaction, which releases a bit of energy, this time only enough to push 2 proteins across the membrane. Here is another way to visualize the 5 steps of our hero's journey. The parallel white lines here represent a membrane, and our stepping stones are arranged in this membrane. Electrons enter enzyme 1, causing it to expel 4 protons. Then the electrons step on carrier 2 en route to enzyme 3. While bound to enzyme 3, the electrons cause it to expel 4 more protons. Next, the electrons step on carrier 4 en route to enzyme 5, where bound, they cause it to expel 2 protons. So this single pair of heroic electrons cause the expulsion of 10 total protons from the cell soup into the space on the other side of the membrane. Notice there are many protons accumulated on this side of the membrane already. So they're being pumped to an area of higher concentration. This is called active transport. What are all these protons doing over here? They are looking for a way to escape their overcrowded conditions. But there is only one type of hallway in this membrane that allows protons to travel in the opposite direction as before, enabling their return to the cell soup. The protons flood through this enzyme the way water floods through a hydroelectric dam. Because they are simply spreading out, that's diffusion, but they are aided by the enzyme which creates a hallway for them to pass through, this movement of protons is an example of facilitated diffusion. And similar to a hydroelectric turbine, this enzyme harnesses energy from the motion of these protons. For every 10 protons that flood through this pink enzyme, 3 ATP molecules are synthesized. ATP is the chemical energy with which cells perform work. So this entire process converted your food into ATP. ATP is the currency of life. All organisms use it. And now you know where it comes from. This is one of biology's most important concepts. The name of this ATP-producing enzyme is ATP synthase, and it is found in all organisms. It separates living things from non-living things. Now, it's worth mentioning here that the identity of the princess in the castle varies between organisms. It's often oxygen, but not always. But it is always something that behaves like oxygen, something of strong electronegativity. This attracts the electrons over the stepstone path, the machinery of which also varies between organisms, but always results in the movement of protons across a membrane. In summary, you have learned that the movement of electrons between enzymes powers transport of protons across a membrane. These protons accumulate on the other side and it becomes overcrowded there. The protons flood back across the membrane through another special enzyme. Like a turbine, this enzyme generates energy from the movement of these protons and stores it in the ATP molecule. In this way, most cells convert energy from their source into ATP. This controlled burn allows organisms to capture more energy than a combustion engine burning the same fuel. So this process of converting hydrogens from your food into ATP is more fuel efficient than any known engine. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, you might consider watching other videos in the series. Here's my contact information, and I always welcome any feedback. mworkman@pima.edu. Good luck in your biology journey.